This meeting is being recorded.
So welcome, everyone. I'm Edwin Rutch. I'm director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. And this is our, this meeting has two purposes. One, it's an introduction to the Empathy Circle Facilitation Training. And part two is I'm running for Congress as the empathy candidate. So I'm also going to say a little bit about the campaign. So we do want to just get started with some introductions, who we are, where we're from, and why you're here. And Bill, would you be willing to start us off?
Sure. My name is Bill Filler. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a retired special education teacher, and I'm here because I've seen the power of listening and how that can help affect and change behavior for the better. Thanks.
Okay, Larry?
I am Larry in Florida, and I'm a retired occupational therapist, and I'm relatively new to the empathy circles, but I just love them. So that's me.
Okay, Marisa?
Hi, I'm Marisa Fouts. I am calling in from Puerto Morelos, Mexico, also from Chicago, where my home is. And we're here for 6 months for the winter. I'm here, this is now my second intro to training because I do want to join a cohort to learn more. I am part of 2 organizations that do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and I'd like to introduce empathy circles as part of how we are in conversation with each other around difficult issues. So really happy to participate. Thank you.
Oh, great. Glad you're here. Anne?
Hi, I'm Anne. I'm in the UK, and I'm being involved with empathy circles now for 2-3 years, and find them very effective and powerful means for communication and making connections. So I'm here to do what I can to help spread this practice and these skills.
Okay, thanks, Anne. And I can't forget your last name. Leticia. Oh, Leticia. Leticia.
Oh, Leti should be easier.
Leticia.
Hello, Leti. Hello, I'm from France, and I live in Martinique. It's a Caribbean island.
Mm-hmm.
And I participated to this meeting maybe 2 years ago. And then with all the COVID situation, etc., I thought about it again, and I decided to try it again, and because I'm very interested in about the nonviolent communication and the empathy and how we can connect between each other. So I'm very glad to be here.
Were you interested in the training part? Was that it, or was it the training?
Sorry?
Was it the training that was it?
I don't really know. In fact, we talk about the climate change. It was with XR, Coke Extinction Rebellion.
Right.
So we talked about the climate change and how we can listen to make change things.
Okay, yeah, so we did a whole series with Extinction Rebellion, and Anne is from Extinction Rebellion as well.
Yeah.
We did a lot of circles around that. So what we wanted to cover in the call today is we're going to do just a short tour of the training website for the Empathy Circle Facilitation Training. So that is how you facilitate an empathy circle. It's a 5-week course. And then I'll just say a few words about my campaign. What we're trying to do is really build an empathy movement. So it's a bigger vision of creating a movement based on empathy to promote empathy in the world. And as part of that, I'm also running for Congress as the empathy candidate here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then I think it sounds like everyone knows how to take part in an empathy circle. So we'll do an empathy circle and have a little debrief afterwards. So let me just show real quick here the Empathy Circle training site, and I'll put a link in to that. And I'm going to just do a screen share of it, of the site. And bear with me if you've seen this before. So if you go to the website, bestempathytraining.com, you'll see this, the website for our training, and you can scroll through and there's a video that will go into real depth into, it's almost like 20 minutes. You can play this video and it gives you a whole tour of the website and the training, shares our vision, of creating a more empathic society. And we're trying to train everyone in the world to take part in an empathy circle and be able to facilitate it. And you can, scroll down. We have a training, and that's what this site is about, is how to become a facilitator. And to take the training, you need to take part in 2 empathy circles at least, and then you can sign up for the training. And taking part today counts as 1 empathy circle. The time commitment is 5 sessions. Will be of 2.5 hours each, and we meet once a week. And you can scroll down, you'll just see we hold them either on Saturdays in this time slot or on Mondays. And the next training is going to be on a Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So, and then you can click through and there's translations into the different time zones. And there's a lot of information there about the training. And also, I'll put this link in here, is this is the information about the empathy for Congress, Edwin Empathy Rutch for Congress. This is about I'm running for Congress in the San Francisco Bay Area. You can kind of scroll down, you can see that it's really about how do we create more empathy in the district here. And you can see more, about the mediation we've done with the political left and right. What we're trying to do is bridge the divides between the Republicans and the Democrats here in the United States. And these are just, different. We have this empathy tent that we've set up and done, street level mediation between the left and right. You can scroll down kind of more about me. And there's just a lot of different videos, just kind of giving an explanation of all the work we've done around empathy and the trainings. And so at the very bottom is a video that shows some of the mediation work we've done. So yeah, so you can kind of explore that. And there's a link here to volunteer. If you want to kind of help out on the campaign, you can click that, as well as donate. So that's just a very quick introduction. Jeff, you have any questions about the training? Or yeah, go ahead, Marisa, you're muted.
Yeah, for the prerequisite before beginning a training module, is that any empathy circle that's on the calendar, or is it specific to these?
Yeah,
intro?
anyone,
just 2
yeah.
circles.
And
you
just so
said
you have a little bit of experience in it, before trying to facilitate, just that you've taken part.
Okay. My husband is also interested in, so I wanted to just direct him to where he could get started. So I just, I'll look at the calendar to see what others are available. And then you said the next cohort starts, I saw it on the website, I'll go there and look, but to be determined in April on Mondays, is that?
Yeah, it looks like there's Bill and Larry and Ann are working on setting that up. Or do you want to say anything about the?
Sure, tentatively it would be April 9th. That's what we're shooting for.
Okay.
But I have to meet with the
No, it's actually May.
Oh, May, I'm sorry.
May 9th.
Thank you.
Oh, May.
Nice,
Okay,
nice save there, Edwin.
Yeah.
I just got in big trouble. Yeah, so I just have to meet with the production team to see if that fits with everyone, but I think it will. So May 9th.
So the time slots are like, it is usually what we do is we have like 4 or 5 weeks of intro cafes, and then a 5-week training, and then another 5-week intro cafe, and it's on Mondays, 10 a.m. Pacific time. So this one would be yeah, Monday. So the team wants to set up some more intro cafes on Monday. So it will be what, it's March. Let's see where we at. So next week, no, it would be starting April 4th, April 11th, April 18th, 25th, and 2nd would be more intro cafes. So you can take as many as you want.
Mhm.
And then probably the 9th is
Mhm.
when it would start.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, and there's other events we're doing too. You might find this one. Let me put this in here in the link, and I'll just do a screen share. We have other sort of events that we're doing, empathy cafes. I think you might find this one of real interest. Now I'll do a screen share of it. On April 25th and 27th, we're doing this one, which is during the National Week of Conversation. There's a community trying to do the bridging political and social divides. And we're working together with this group called Police to Peace. So this is going to have the police and the community coming together in a big empathy cafe. We hope to have at least 100, participants in that call, and that you're welcome to attend that too if you're. And I'll put the link in here. So I just put the link in. If you're wanting to attend that, there's 2 dates for that. That's going to be more in the evening Pacific time, 4 p.m. Pacific. So it'll be kind of in the evening for North America. It's hard time for Europe. Okay, any other questions or? Okay, then we can just, since we're just 6 here, we can do an empathy cafe for about an hour and a half. And we can, let's see, we'll have the topic. Let me put the topic in. So that's our topic. What issues are important to you and how might empathy help address them, or whatever is alive for you? And I think everyone here knows how to take part in an empathy circle, so we can skip the how-to instructions. I don't know, Anne, do you want to facilitate? You up for facilitate?
I'm happy to, but I'm happy for Larry or Bill too.
Okay.
I'm happy to just be a participant today.
Okay, Bill, do you want to time keep or?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
track?
Yeah.
What do you think, like 5-minute turns or?
5-minute turns. I have this, you'll hear a little piano riff. And when that occurs, it doesn't mean that you have to cut yourself off in mid-sentence, finish your thought, get a last reflection, and move on. If you happen to not see this, again, this is a stale joke for everybody. There's a very expensive handcrafted sign I have here. So then that'll give you a visual cue. Okay, that's it. So who would like to speak? We've got a lot going on. There's Ukraine. There's what issues are important to you? Well, there we go. Someone like to speak? Not named Bill? Larry.
Yeah,
Thank
start out. So yeah, well, Ukraine. Yeah, that's wow. I think that's on all of our minds. Ukraine, the political divide. Wow. How does empathy play into that? Wow. Going to need a whole lot of empathy for everybody to be able to communicate on these issues. I'll stop there.
So Ukraine is on your mind. It's kind of overwhelming, and you just you're full of that and how empathy in Ukraine, and that's what I'm sort of getting, but I haven't gotten a clear path yet.
Yeah, Ukraine, the war, the political divide that's been brewing for some years in this country, and apparently not just in this country, but worldwide. There's a political division going on, unfolding, and it seems like the two separate sides are so polarized there's no empathy between them. I'll stop there.
Sure. So you're taking the conflict in Ukraine and couching it in a larger global issue, which is a divide where we're polarized. And so people aren't really talking to each other. And the issue is to bridge those divides.
Yeah, we've been reading Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny. And this is what Timothy is saying, that's been going on for years, that there's a political division going on worldwide, not just in our country. It's been obvious in our country. And how empathy plays in is, I think, to be able to communicate from one side to the other, the left and the right, it's going to require empathy. And I don't see any other way of communicating but with empathy.
So you're referencing Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny that you've been reading, and he's talked about the divide being worldwide, not just a U.S. political issue, and that the basis for healing that divide is empathy.
Yeah, he was talking this morning on one of the YouTubes I was watching about how it's so difficult for each polarized side or each side to be able to hear the other. It's almost impossible for each one to hear the other. So I don't know how we can do it without empathy. It seems like it's got to be there.
So he was talking about how as these divides get wider, the chasm gets wider, how difficult it is to hear each other. And you feel that empathy is the basis for at least beginning those conversations.
Yeah, I think it actually happens even between individuals. They could even be in the same political party. Individuals in the family, let's say, become divided on some topic. And if there's not an empathic connection, then it's tragic how a human communication can break down.
So you're saying that it's not even just different political parties, but even within one political party or a family, there's a polarizing topic, and then the dominoes fall in a kind of dysfunctional way where people aren't talking to each other. So empathy and in individuals, empathizing with other individuals is a way to kind of pull us back from the precipice.
Yeah, and empathy is not in a book. Empathy is something that's alive in human beings. I mean, thank goodness that it's not just in a book. It's something that each of us is capable of when we're not, kind of preaching our point of view or trying to convince someone else. It requires listening, and we all have ears, so there's a possibility.
Right. And so you're saying that empathy is a way to kind of dissolve boundaries and as a way to respectfully and listen to each other without losing oneself or necessarily having to agree with everything, but to establish a communicative bridge.
Exactly. Thank you, Bill. I feel fully heard.
Okay. All right. And correct me if I'm wrong, Blondelay? Is that right?
Yeah, I think you said it right.
Blondelay. Right.
It's my surname.
Oh, so Leticia is your first.
Yeah, Leticia is my first.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. All right. Okay. All right. So all right. So I'll go with, fairly. I was a special education teacher for almost 40 years, and I dealt with really high risk students with emotional challenge, students at risk of going to jail, hospitalized, or being removed from the home. I'll stop there, let you reflect.
So I have to say what you said, right?
Yeah, or paraphrase the best you can.
Okay. You said you were teacher, and now you are retired, and you had to work with some students that had issues, that had a difficult life. Is that right?
Yes, no, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. No, I appreciate you're trying to stick with me. And so when a kid, frequently they could be violent. These kids could be violent. And when a child was violent, what we would do is we'd group up and we would ask, what is the communicative intent of that violent act? In other words, what research has shown and what we believed is that everything we do is an attempt to communicate with our fellow human beings. I'll stop there.
You said sometimes you had to work with students that that could be violent, and you tried to communicate with them with empathy to understand what was the need that they expressed with this violence.
Exactly. And when we could address that, when they felt heard, many times it was they didn't get fed last night, they saw another violent act or something. When we could address that, then the violence went down, and and they could make better decisions.
Mm-hmm. So you said when these students felt they were listened, someone was listening to them, to their needs, they felt they were less violent, and they found more solutions for the problems or to communicate.
Right. Yeah. And it's and that's what I found when we've taken the empathy tent pre-pandemic to rallies, both on the left and the right. When in that kind of charged atmosphere, people come up, they expect an argument. I'll stop there.
And that's what you found. It's what. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. It's a key you found because of the empathy. A solution was found because of this empathy communication, and that's helped to find solutions about it.
Yeah, it's not solutions even, but pre-solution.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, yeah, before we said, okay, this is how to fix it. A person felt heard as an individual. And when a person feels heard and respected as an individual, the labels, you're on the left, you're on the right, the labels fall away. And it's just two human beings. And from that point of view, as two human beings, we can start to have constructive conversation. I'll stop there.
Okay, I understand what you mean. There is no division anymore. There is not one side and one side. There is just two human beings that can communicate together and be equal.
Right. And relating it, and then I'm going to finish here, but relating to the worldview, once you've heard someone else, and they've heard you, it's very unlikely that you'd want to bomb them. And I'll stop there.
When there is two human beings that can communicate, it's unlikely that there is a womp.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to hit the other person over the head with a stick or do be violent. In other words, yeah. Thank you. And thanks for trying to, stick with me there. I know it wasn't easy. So thank you very much. I feel fully heard. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I missed some details.
Don't worry about it. I speak only one language and not that well.
Yeah. Okay. That makes me feel more comfortable.
Good, sure.
So now I speak and I say.
Right. Pick a listener. Yeah, just pick a listener and off you go.
I will say Anne.
Yeah.
I would like to talk to you about the violence that can exist sometimes with some alive. Oh, sorry. I'm a little upset to not Okay, sorry, I do it again. I would like to talk about the violence. Sometimes I can see, like on the slaughterhouses, we can see a lot of violence. And I ask me often the question how we can answer to the needs of someone. Like some people desire to eat meat, but at the same time, for this desire, we have to make violence to other living beings. That's all.
So what I'm hearing you would like to, the topic you want to look into is the violence that you see that exists in slaughterhouses and how to address that for people who like to eat meat in order, I think, to make a change so that they can see that this is a violent thing.
Yeah, it's what I said. Thank you. And sometimes there is two sides. There is one side with vegan people or vegetarians, and one side with people that can eat everything. And these two sides can have difficulties to communicate because the side that eats meat can feel hurt sometimes because they think they are judged. And the other side would like to make a change, can be angry because they see violence. And it can be complicated to find solution to, I think the only solution to communicate is the empathy.
So what you're saying is that though quite often the groups, they fall into two sections, and one of them tends to be younger people who are probably vegetarian, and then, or maybe vegan, and then probably an older group of people who are normally eat meat and have been doing that. And what happens is that group tends to feel judged by the other grouping.
Yeah.
And then in frustration, there's frustration and anger on the part of those who would like to see the change happening, the younger people who don't want the violence to be continuing.
Yeah, and sometimes we try to be less violent between humans. We try to a better communication, but I think the communication is not only between humans, it's also with the nature, with the plants, with the animals, because I really think someone, when he's violent with his cat or his dog, can be violent with all living beings.
I'll tell you what I've got. I think I might have missed the last bit. So you have been talking about that if there's empathy, that will help those groups to come together. That's what you'd said earlier.
Yeah.
And also you talked about people who believe in non-violence. They don't only see it for not having violence between people, but also not violence towards other forms of nature. So as well as human beings, but also to plants and animals and to all of nature.
Yeah. And I also said sometimes when you can be violent with your animal, you maybe can also hurt another human, because we could see that a lot of people that became very violent began with animals.
So what I'm hearing is that that by being violent towards animals, people also hurt or can hurt human beings. And also there's the point that you think that people who are very violent have often started their violent behavior with animals.
Yeah. And no, I'm just asking me the question, how can we all live together? I mean, how some people need to eat meat to be happy, and at the same time we can't, if they need that, it would be violent to stop that. And if we continue to kill animals, it's also violent. So I don't know how we could all, I don't know what would be the solution for that. I'm sorry if it is not very clear.
Well, I'm not sure, but I think what you're suggesting is that, and what you're wondering about, in order for people to be able to understand one another or get on, but it's what you're trying to achieve. But you also think that people who feel they need to eat meat in order to be happy, yeah, I think I've kind of lost your point about being. Yeah, please, can you clarify that?
I said, I don't know how we can be non-violent. I think it can be violent when we don't answer to someone's need or what he thinks he needs. But at the same time, if what he needs is something violent, I don't know how we can do.
Okay, so I think what you're saying you're struggling with is that that by not respecting someone's belief in what their needs are, then that is in itself violent towards them potentially.
Yeah.
So you can't see how. But if you're not going to have any violence, you can't quite see how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So a dilemma.
Yeah, it's a dilemma.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
So that
Thank you
was
very
time.
much.
Okay, so Marisa, would you be happy to be my listener?
I would.
Okay. Yes, I think it is a difficult area. And it's probably not as black and white as it would be nice if it was more black and white than it is, but nature isn't black and white. There's violence in nature, quite extremely. Animals kill each other to survive. You know, they need, that's how, I guess, food chains kind of work.
So you were reflecting on the topic that Leticia had brought up around this idea of the violence of meeting one's needs at the expense of violence of another, and how it would be nice that if that issue was a little clearer, and use the words black and white if it was clear in that way, but even as we see reflected in nature, that violence is part of how that system works.
I think I think there's a lot in how you raise, you know, how you get your meat, and where, if you are a meat eater, what you're prepared to do to get it. And I think that animals can have a good life but end up being eaten by human beings, and that I'm not sure that that is necessarily violent.
So you are expanding a little bit on this idea that it matters how the animal is treated during its life, and that it may actually be morally okay for animals to be used for food purposes.
Yeah, and it depends how they're looked after and how intensively a farm, or it seems to make complete sense in some parts of the world, in order to feed ourselves, that we grow crops, but we rear animals, and the animals help enable us to grow the crops and feed the animals and so on. So it's kind of a circle of life. And that could be in a healthy way.
So you're explaining how the context matters of where and how the animals are raised and how we do agriculture and how we raise livestock, and that it is possible to do those things in healthy ways.
Mm. So I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat meat. But if there are circumstances, I think, in which I would eat meat, and if I was living my life where I was producing my food, then it probably would be necessary for me to be able to survive, to be able to do that. But I wouldn't be eating a lot of meat.
So you shared that you have chosen to be a vegetarian, but can also hold that there is a time and a place that it could have been a necessary choice for you, and that can be done in a respectful manner, and that even if that was a choice that you found yourself in, you still think you would choose to not eat a lot of meat.
And I think you have to look at, I'm not a vegan, but I don't actually eat much animal produce. I do a little bit, but I think we have to look at the whole balance of what is being done in order to create vegan food, in terms of the energy that we take from the planet in order to make it and transport it. So I think we need to return to living more like our ancestors did, really, with our food, the way we get food. Yeah.
So you shared that you're not vegan necessarily, and that you feel that it's necessary for us to once again examine the whole context of how vegan food is produced and distributed, because even that can be problematic, even though the choice itself might be, even though the choice itself might be one that's considered a good one. And then you ended with saying that you think that we should be living more in accordance with how our ancestors lived.
Yeah, so our food, we should be sourcing our food from near where we live. So if we live by the sea, then it would include eating fish, for example, or it would include eating the food that could be grown or produced on the land that we're on or near. Is that my time?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, sort of expanding on the idea that we should live more like our ancestors. You explained that that could mean that we need to consume products or foods that are available to us, that we're proximate to where we live, versus maybe shipping from other areas, and then all of what is involved in making that possible, that it's healthier to source foods from where we're located.
Thank you. I feel fully heard, Marisa.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Edwin, would you be willing to?
Yep, listening.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am really enjoying how the conversation has taken a turn towards examining our relationships, whether it be how we produce food, whether it be, economic exchanges and how that might be playing out in our current situation in the war. And I'll stop there.
So I'm hearing you're appreciating how the conversation is looking at relationships, be it how we produce food related to the war, just any sort of relationships.
Yeah, that's exactly right, because I do think it's interesting that as we see this war play out between Ukraine and Russia, there are all kinds of other connections that we have an opportunity to examine in terms of import, export, and how we get the materials that we rely on in our own personal lives.
So looking at what's happening with the war, it's also looking at all kind of the larger social system, the different, how we get our products, how the services, just how things work and sort of.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting examination of how connected we are. And while we may not be living in Russia, what are the relationships economically that we have? Like, for instance, we may buy products from China that purchase raw materials from Russia.
So you're just saying the war is showing all the interconnectedness, like the products in Russia are related to things we get from China and vice versa. And we're all very interrelated. So you're sort of pointing out that interrelatedness. Yes.
And that brings me to a consideration of like, well, what kinds of choices can I make in my life in the direction of sort of what Anne was talking about and Leticia, right? What type of impact do I have just based on how I make choices consciously?
You're looking at yourself, like you're making a lot of different choices, and how can you consciously make those choices to impact the larger society?
Yes, and that I really believe that it's important that we are making conscious choices, and I can hold that can be really difficult because there are so many layers and research that needs to go into how we choose what we consume.
So you want to make conscious choices, but there are so many different layers on how all this relationship works. Sounds like so you need to sort of become aware of all those different relationships.
Yes, and some of that requires an ability to slow down, and I think that's why. To bring it around to how empathy helps us to address these problems is just an insistence to slow down and create time and space to make conscious choices.
And to be able to make these conscious choices, you have to be able to slow down and maybe examine the relationships, but it does take a slowing down to raise that awareness.
It does. And empathy, also what I think is interesting about this idea of having empathy is that it challenges us to look at that problem from multiple points of view and maybe not just our perspective on something.
So what you're appreciating about empathy, perhaps like in the empathy circle here, is you have a lot of different points of view. You don't just take your own point of view, but you're hearing and taking in all these different points of view.
Yes, and that we have a commitment to solving problems from multiple points of view, even though that means more work, maybe more time, maybe it takes longer. But that's really what it takes to get to an actual solution.
Yeah, to get to really good solutions, actual solutions, you need to take in all the different perspectives, but it does take time, it does take commitment, but it sounds like maybe longer term would be beneficial. It'd be better decisions.
Yep, that's everything. Thank you so much. I feel heard.
Okay, feel heard, then great. Speak to Larry.
Ready, Evan.
Yeah, in terms of the question, I had thought of another question of how do we build an empathy movement is maybe another question to look at, because it's like Marisa is saying that everything's sort of connected, but if we can just start with empathy, that I think that has a ripple effect, and to think in terms of just how in all these different systems do we create more empathy.
So I'm going to hear you saying that everything, like Marissa was saying, everything is already interconnected. That's the way it is, the way the universe, nature, everything is interconnected. There's an interrelationship. So how can we create a movement in which empathy or empathic interaction spreads throughout the already connected web?
Yeah, so if children are learning to be empathic with each other in the, being sensitive to the felt experience of other students and themselves, and they're being heard and they're listening to others, even in the schools, then that sensitivity, I think, passes on to being sensitive to animals too, the well-being of animals. So if we're creating an empathic, school system, it's going to spread to other environments.
So I'm going to hear you saying, like Bill is working in the school system. If we start with the very young children and teach them an empathic way of being, then this would spread out to wherever they go.
Yeah, and so if we can take any environment that we're in and bring an empathic sort of a presence, maybe even the activist community, which we've tried to do with XR, is you bring an empathic awareness there, and then that's like, well, let's bring together, the vegans and the, people who eat meat, bring them together to have, dialogue with each other. They're learning how to be more sensitive to each other, and that sort of ripples out maybe their families, to their other relationships. So you just kind of start where you can, and it sort of spreads, it seems.
So I'm going to hear you saying that this really has application everywhere. Maybe example with the vegans and the people who are going to have heart attacks. I'm being a little humorous.
I didn't quite say that, but
you didn't say that. Okay, the meat eaters. All right. So yeah, that it could, empathy has a place everywhere, and everything's already interconnected. So it just would spread naturally.
yeah, so I was thinking of maybe these discussions would be better framed around how do we build a movement, like an empathy movement, instead of like what issues are important to you, but how do we get together and really build a movement that's for spreading empathy and, and creating that culture of empathy, which I think if we look at the war, is a huge empathy deficit, right? The invasion of Ukraine is a deficit of empathy. It's like people just not empathizing with each other.
So you're saying that maybe we could look at how to create a movement of empathy, not focusing on the issues because there are so many issues, but how do we bring about an empathic movement? And then using the example of the war in Ukraine, a total failure of empathy, total lack of empathy results in human beings going to battle and fighting with one another when empathy hasn't been, I guess, available, or hasn't been tried, or isn't there to be utilized to bring peace. Then we human beings seem to just end up happy to go to war with one another.
Yeah, and then it's I had thought, for example, in Ukraine, if we had an empathy movement, I would have gone to Ukraine, set up empathy tents, like on one of those streets, the roads where the Russians are coming in, and just sort of block the road and say, hey, we're here to listen. You kind of put your life on the line, but, the soldiers put their life on the line too, to be out in public, be advocating for an empathic way of being.
Okay, so here you have a vision of, and those long roads where there's long rows of tanks going over there and putting up the empathy tent and saying, hey, I'm sorry, we're using this space right now for empathy. You want to climb down out of your tank and we'll have a talk.
Yeah, I mean, and we need a couple hundred people to do it, to set that up. But I think there's a lot of things we can do. I thought that to have a movement to get out there, yeah, to promote empathy and dialogue.
Thank you, everyone.
I want to just reflect that last part, and then I'm done.
I'm sorry. I dropped out of that last part. Could you say it again, please? I'm sorry.
Oh, just yeah, it was just to create a movement. There's a lot that we can do to create a movement, I think. Yeah.
There's a lot that we can do to create a movement for empathy.
Yep, feel fully heard. Thanks, Larry.
All right. Leticia, would you be my listener? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess paradox is the word. It's a big problem. It's a big, big, big problem. Empathy is needed in this world, and empathy is in each one of us. It's a big problem.
What you said is there is a paradox because this word needs empathy, but there is a myth of empathy. Is it what you said?
Yes, there's a big need for empathy. It's a big problem. It's worldwide, it's historic, and it's in each of us.
There is a big, we need much more empathy in this world, and you think it is inside of everybody we can do empathy.
Yes, that's the point. Empathy is within each of us. And it almost seems like we need examples of people being kind to animals, to nature, to the environment, to politicians. It seems like we humans need that example before we think it's possible.
People need example of kindness, empathy, to understand how to do it.
Yeah, and that setting the example, I think, takes courage to go against the tradition. I don't know if that's the right word. It seems to take courage for a human being to go against the popular way.
It goes against courage to go against the tradition, against the habits and what is popular.
Yeah, it takes courage. I think in French, courage is heart. Is that courage? It takes courage. It takes heart to go against tradition.
It takes courage in French, to go against traditions, and it asks to give it with your heart.
The wonderful thing about empathy is it actually feels good.
But the empathy, it feels good when there is empathy.
Yes, it doesn't feel bad.
Of course,
it feels good.
It doesn't feel bad.
Yeah. I think that's kind of a nature's way of letting us know, hey, come this way. It feels good.
It could be natural to say, hey, come this way, to the empathic side, and it feels good.
Right. And if you go to war, you're going to feel bad.
Yeah. And if you go to the side of the war and the violence, it's going to feel very bad.
And paradoxically, humans have been on the war side for thousands of years. We can't seem to break out of that tradition.
But we still go to the wrong side since a lot of time, because we go to the traditions side, and it's not always the empathic side.
Yeah. So we have this competitive tradition of winning the battle, being the winner of the battle.
Can you repeat, please?
Yeah,
Sorry.
we have this historic tradition of trying to be the winner of the battle.
Okay, we have the historic tradition to want to be the winner of the battle.
And the irony is, peace is the way things are if we just cooperate. Then we have peace, and then we can communicate peacefully, empathically, and it feels good.
But we could cooperate empathically, and not try to fight between each other, and it feels good. It's the empathic way. We can breathe something better if we cooperate.
Thank you, Leticia. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bill, can I talk to you?
Sure,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I totally agree with what said Larry. It has a lot of effort sometimes, and a lot of courage to change the habits, to not go to the direction where everybody goes, and because if it is not the empathic direction.
So you agree with Larry that it takes courage not to just, act out of reflex with what everybody's doing, and to go to the empathic side, which takes a little bit more time and effort.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And I am thinking again about what you said about when you communicate with these students with empathy, it helps them to be less violent. But Noah asked me a question is, when someone doesn't know what he needs, how can we help this person to know what she needs?
So you, something I said as far as, what really students were, when they were acting out, they really wanted empathy. So that resonated with you. However, you have a further question about what if a person doesn't know what they need? How do you then help them find out what they really need?
Yeah, and I'm reading a book about Marshall Rosenberg, and he gives a very good example about it. I wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone go visit his psychotherapist, and he asked him. He tells him, "I am feeling very depressed. I don't just see any reason to go on." And most of the psychotherapists answered, when did you begin? Since how long did you feel it? When did it begin? But that didn't help to create a connection, or that didn't help this person to understand what she needs. But if I was in this situation, to be honest, I wouldn't know what to say to help this person to know what she needs and to empathically connect with her.
So you are talking about an example that Marshall Rosenberg, that book you're reading, said about psychotherapy, where a person comes to a therapist and says, I'm really very depressed, and maybe even suicidal or whatever. And the therapist then, most therapists would say, well, how long have you felt that way? And Marshall Rosenberg made the point that that doesn't really help them, the person who's in crisis, understand their needs or what's happening. And it also doesn't make a connection between the therapist and the patient.
Yeah, exactly. Because probably this person doesn't really know at this moment what she needs. And the good point would be to help this person to understand what she needs. And that's the point of a lot of violence. In fact, when people are violent, it's because they need something, but they don't always know what they need. And if we help this person to understand what they need, it stops a little their violence inside. The way they express these needs can be violent.
So the way you're interpreting what Marshall Rosenberg said, or what he said in the book, is that when people don't understand what they need, then their frustration could be expressed as violence. And so that therefore, when they kind of get a self-understanding, then there would be less violence, I think you're inferring.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I felt really listened.
Okay, you done? Okay.
Yeah.
For now. Okay. All right, Marisa, would you listen to me?
Sure.
So I'll respond to Leticia's question about, what do you do with the student or the person, in my case it was student, but person, generally speaking, who doesn't know what they want, and so therefore acts out. I'll stop there.
So you are returning to Leticia's question about how to aid someone who isn't able to articulate their needs, and you're going to use the example of a student in your case in particular.
Right. And so what happens with people, who act, impulsively and reflexively is they don't fully think. They're actually not using their gray matter. They're using the cerebellum, which is what's called the lizard brain. And that is where we go. So we put like a hand on the fire and we withdraw it. We don't, we get a reflex. We don't think like, well, is this good or is this bad or something like that. We use reflex it. And that's what students or people who are violent feel. They kind of feel threatened. And so therefore they act impulsively and reflexively. I'll stop there. I know that's a lot. Sorry about that.
No, I'm following that you were saying that when we're in a reactive state to something, we are actually acting from a different part of our brain. And that brain is called the lizard brain, and it's actually rooted in acting from instinct rather than maybe using the frontal lobe, the cerebellum, you said?
Yeah, no, the cerebrum, not using the cerebrum. And
cerebrum to make conscious choices. Yeah. Instead, the violent action comes from a reflexive lizard brain place.
Right. And what we did is that we set up not punishment. This is very important. Not punishment, but we set limits around the violence. At the same time, so we go like this with one hand. At the same time, we say, we want to find out more and then listen to them.
So your goal was to sort of set some boundaries to create safety.
Yes.
Around violent behaviors, while also allowing for space to explore why the behavior was occurring, what need is not maybe being met there.
Yes. And then we did not label. Many times the kids had been always told, oh, you're bad, or you're this, or you're that. And we said and reinforced that they were good, but they weren't making good decisions. And there could be different decisions that would be more effective in getting their needs met.
So here you're highlighting the distinction between labeling a person as bad or and not a good thing to do to be versus labeling a behavior and a choice as problematic, and essentially returning agency to the person that they can make choices that don't inherently reflect who they are.
Right. And I remember one specific, there was a wonderful African-American young girl who I dearly care for, ex-student. And she was being harassed. And so she tried to go after someone with, I think it was a chair. And I had to, stop the chair. I didn't have to get physical with her because we had established a relationship, but I had to stand in front of the chair and say, whoa, wait a minute. And and then she kind of poured her heart out to me and she said, I'm really a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And my response is, there wasn't 1 second that I didn't think you're a good person, but there's a better way to get your needs met than hitting someone over the chair. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So you're sharing a story about a student that you had, a particular affinity for, who was being harassed by a different student, and chose to react and lash out violently by grabbing a chair to attack somebody back with. And you found that you had to bodily stop the action from occurring, and then engage in a conversation where the student wanted to make it really clear that she is in fact a good person. And then you reassured her primarily that there was never a point that you doubted that she was a good person, and that it's important that she finds nonviolent ways to get her needs met.
Thank you, Marissa. I feel fully heard.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. Did I see, Edwin, that you want us to take a break, or?
Oh, no, I saw Anne wanted to take a group break, but I was just suggesting if anyone needs a bio break, just, turn your video off or whatever and go. So to continue, so that was my suggestion. Does that work, Anne? You're muted.
If that's what other people prefer, yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. And if you need a break, I'm happy to, be respectful of that. But or do you feel like you're in a place to be my listener?
No, I'll be your listener. That would be a pleasure.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll take a moment to collect my thoughts here. I'm really, I'm seeing a thread in this conversation around the idea of interconnectedness, needs that need to be met, and an understanding of how our choices have impact. I'll stop there.
So you needed a moment to gather your thoughts, and then you were saying that you see a thread within the conversation which is around our interconnectedness and about our needs being met, and understanding of needs, was it?
How our choices,
understanding of choices, impact.
Yes. And I really liked what Larry brought up around the idea of status quo, and how sometimes the reason the status quo is what it is because it requires a lot of effort to change it. I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, so you like the idea that Larry brought up about status quo, and that in order to change something, a lot of effort is needed.
Yeah.
So defaulting back.
Yes. And the question that's coming to me right now is, in this current paradigm, in the current status quo, how are we being intentional about meeting the needs of everyone?
So what you're looking at is a kind of fairly, I'm hearing it as the bigger picture of, in the status quo that we're in at the moment, how are we going to go about looking at getting everybody's needs met, like taking into account everybody?
Yes, and that sort of is playing with the idea that I brought up earlier about how that takes more time and effort, and there aren't, like you and Leticia had talked about, there aren't black and white solutions necessarily. I'll stop there.
So you're looking at, well, how is that going to happen? And you're referring back to something you brought up earlier, which it was a need for us to slow down and take more time and put the effort in, and the things that both Leticia and I had said, we'd been expressing that things weren't black and white, and therefore we need that and effort and time put into finding solutions.
Yes, and so in order to do that, one of the things that one of the reasons why empathy circles became what I see as a key skill building necessity in the types of conversations that we have to interrogate the status quo is for everyone to be skilled in having conversation in the first place.
So what you're saying, I'm guessing, is that in order to challenge the status quo, we need to have conversations together about it, and in order to take everybody's needs into account. But what you see is the empathy circles give us a basic skill of being, which would enable us to have those conversations.
Yeah, that the skill is so necessary, and also an intention of whose voices are in the room when decisions are being made, whose needs are being considered as we make decisions, and how do we create a culture of considering the needs of everyone in decisions that we make.
So so you talked about them not only needing to have the skills, but we need the intention to do it. And also, in addition to that, we need to be really thoughtful about who, and aware of whose voices are there, and whose needs are being understood and considered as we make any and all decisions. So we need to create somehow a culture where those elements are present.
Yes, thank you so much. I feel heard.
Great, thank you. Larry, would you listen to me, please?
Yes, Anne.
Oh. Well, it's exciting. This conversation is really quite interesting and exciting. I find it exciting because I really do believe we need to make huge, huge changes. We need to make transformative changes, which will break apart the habits and the status quos and the way we become comfortable, or those of us who have become comfortable. We need to put those things on the line in order to transform ourselves, which we've got to do if we're going to continue to exist on this planet.
So, and I hear you saying that we have a huge challenge and is exciting, and that we're going to need to transform the paradigm, the status quo. It's probably not going to be easy, but this is what we really need if we're going to be able to coexist and survive as human beings on a living planet.
Yeah, and my excitement is not just, it's actually that this is what we're talking about in the room now. I'm really delighted to be here and part of this conversation.
And the excitement you're expressing is related to the conversation we're having in the room now.
Mm. And I really think we need to listen to younger people, because they have a connection to a much bigger investment in the future of our future, you know, the human future, because it's more directly impacts them, and they're less invested in the status quo that's been established by those of us of an older generation who have benefited from, particularly those of us who've benefited from the way human beings have been behaving and treating each other on this planet, and the planet treating the planet too. I'll pause.
So Anna, I hear you saying that the older generation really needs to listen to the younger generation, because the younger generation has a huge future, has a huge stake in the health of the planet. Whereas the older generation may have been responsible for setting up the scenarios that are unfolding, but they're kind of on the way out. So they're probably less concerned about the overall conditions that the younger generation is facing. They're the ones who are going to bear the brunt of the problems that the older generation has. Unfortunately, maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're things that were not foreseen, but they are a problem. And we really need a huge paradigm shift and ability to listen the older generation to the younger generation with empathy. You didn't say that, but I'm getting that you're saying that.
Yeah, and I think that it's not just because they're not going to be here. I think that they've got they're more enmeshed in the status quo. So it's actually harder for them, even if they see and understand the need for change. It's really much harder. They've got to break out of their patterns of a much longer lifetimes of the way we've all learned to cope with the nuttiness of our planet and the way the oppressions work. And you know, we're all, in a way, we were always doing our best, but it's been without sufficient awareness. We haven't been aware. So it's kind of bringing together of the awareness and transforming. And this was one of the things that was said. I can't remember now. I think, yeah, it was Marissa, I think, who talked about the need to slow down. Because I think in order to make any change, we need to slow down. We need to make big change, to make transformative change. We have actually got to start within ourselves in our own lives. And we've got to do it very thoughtfully but urgently. We can't take forever sorting it out.
Yeah, I'll paraphrase that this way.
Yeah, do.
It's hard to tell a man in a Cadillac. It's hard to tell a man in a Cadillac he's doing everything wrong.
Okay,
thanks. The older generation, they're so invested in the successful way that's polluting and killing the planet, and they're so successful at it. They're just happily zooming down the highway, and they don't want to hear that they need to meditate. They need to turn introspective. They need to practice empathy when they're in a big hurry to go to the next meeting because they're going to make a lot of money. And you didn't say any of that, but I'm trying to paraphrase what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to just put in something there because I appreciate you're just paraphrasing it, but actually it's in me as well. And it's not others. People need to do it. I need to find out how I can do it better and work on and do it and make the changes. And we actually all have that responsibility. We've all got to get engaged with this.
I like that. Yeah, it starts at home. Like Gandhi said, I need to be the change that I think other people should change. I need to do, yeah.
Happy with that paraphrase. I need to be the change.
Yeah.
Be the change.
Yeah.
Thanks. Feel fully heard, Larry.
Thank you, Anne. Okay. Do we have time for another round? Bill, will you listen?
Yeah,
Sure.
we've got about 20 minutes.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. So yeah, I'm enjoying this conversation too. It's fertile ground. It's to me, it's looking at the truth of what's going on. So I'm enjoying the conversation.
So you're enjoying the conversation a great deal because you feel that it's getting to real issues, real core issues.
Yeah, it's getting to the root of the issue. And it's complicated. I think it's complicated. And like what Anne was just saying, you know, the older generation that's on its way out, you know, is kind of, I guess you'd say unintended consequences. But as soon as I say unintended consequences, then I remember, oh, wait a minute, you know, they knew back in the 70s that this was going to happen.
So you're kind of reflecting on what Anne said about the older generation on the way out. And you kind of also were thinking like, but wait a minute, you know, even in the 70s, when the older generation were much younger, we knew about the effects of, and I believe you're referring to climate change.
Yeah, the scientists already knew. And there are articles that go back, you know, like almost 100 years saying that if we take these fossil fuels and burn them over the next many, many decades, the result will be catastrophic. But it's like we just wanted to live in denial.
Right. So you were saying that it was well established scientifically that if we keep on burning fossil fuels, will adversely affect the whole planetary system. But we just were living in denial. Excuse me, in denial.
Yeah, I used to scuba dive and snorkel in the Florida Keys. And when I heard that the coral reefs were dying, I couldn't believe it.
So when you used to scuba dive and snorkel in the Keys, and when you heard that the coral reefs were dying, you couldn't believe it.
So I went there, and it is devastating to see these beautiful coral reefs that are just now looking like graveyards of littered dead coral all over the seafloor.
So when you heard about it, you went there and you saw the reality of, you know, these beautiful coral reefs that were just basically bleached out and looking, you know, or just dead.
And I got a couple of boats and I got a U.S. Coast Guard captain's license. And I thought that joining this team of scuba divers, we can fix this problem.
Mm-hmm. So you got a captain's license, you got a boat, and you figured that, you know, some scuba divers, we can fix this problem.
And it finally occurred to me that all the scuba divers in the world cannot fix this problem.
Yeah. And once you went in, you and saw the enormity of the problem, you realized that all the scuba divers in the world couldn't fix it.
And it's part of it is the CO2 in the atmosphere is making the oceans more acidic. That's part of it.
Mm-hmm. So part of the reason is that the CO2 makes the oceans more acidic.
And another part of it is that industry has dumped tons of extremely toxic chemical waste in rivers worldwide.
And the other part of that is that there's been a lot of toxic waste dumping by industries worldwide.
And these are the guys driving Cadillacs. I don't mean to, you know, say something against a car brand, but I'm saying that these are the successful ones that it's hard to tell someone who's successful, that's so successful, it's hard to tell them, hey, you're doing something wrong. It's just really hard to tell them.
Right. So you, without denigrating Cadillacs per se, you were saying that people who are very successful and see themselves as successful are sort of have a strong barrier to hearing that they're doing something wrong because that's not what they experience in their own personal reality.
And that's what the whole world is watching unfolding in the Ukrainian war. It's not a Ukrainian war, it's a dictator who has powerful nuclear weapons. And it's hard to tell someone in that category, this is all wrong.
Yeah. And so talking about taking that model of the successful person, et cetera, you extrapolate it to the Ukrainian war, and it's even harder to tell a dictator who has nuclear weapons that they're doing something wrong.
So if I could have 5 more minutes, I could solve all this. Just kidding. I wish I could solve it. Thank you, Bill. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay, sure. All right, I'll talk to Edwin.
Listening.
Okay. I hear what Larry said. And when I think about the Ukrainian situation, I think about the catastrophic failure of leadership worldwide and specifically in the United States.
So when you're thinking about the Ukraine situation, you're thinking of sort of catastrophic global leadership problems, and especially here in the U.S.
Yes, because after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia was open to a lot of United States experts, and we sent these experts from the Milton Friedman supply side economics, and the question was, do we create a safety net for the Russian people, for the poor people, for this transition, or do we go cold turkey?
So you're seeing the responsibility that when the Soviet Union fell, that America could have done more instead of having a cold turkey, economics approach. It could have been more support to help Russia make a transition.
Yeah, and this was, by the way, the leaders of, I think they were from Harvard, I don't know, the Kennedy School, whatever. But, and they said cold turkey, and that gave rise to the people to a sort of Lord of the Flies situation where they were just, the people who had accrued power during the Soviet Union just accrued more power, and the rest of the populace was left out.
Yeah, so I think you're addressing the responsibility that there is some responsibility America has in the leadership for what's happening now, that that they just supported this cold turkey approach in Russia, and then it just created more of a Lord of the Flies sort of a dynamic there.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, just if you see a place that's called Lord of the Flies preschool, don't send your kids there. All right.
Yeah, so just kind of joking. If you see Lord of the Flies, and Lord of the Flies was a movie for anyone that's not familiar with it, that was just like dog eat dog, power.
Right.
And you're just making a joke about that. If you have a school like that, don't go there.
And by the way, there was a real Lord of the Flies situation among Pacific Islanders. And rather than, killing each other and savagery, they actually empathized with each other, and they got together, which helped them survive, and they're friends to this day.
So there was actually a situation where people got together in the Pacific Islands where instead of just being a big power fight, that they cooperated, empathized with each other, and developed long-term friendships. Right.
And so, and that is, I think, as Larry and other people have said, the sort of nature of things is to empathize and to cooperate. And when I look for confirmation, I look for, well, does this exist, in reality? And you only have to look as far as your own body to realize that all your cells are cooperating beautifully every second of the day.
Yeah, so for sort of an empathic way of being, you're just looking for models of how that works, and that the human body is a model of it. All this whole human body, the cells all work together and cooperate with each other.
Right. And so as far as human behavior is concerned, it's my belief that the ugliness and violence that occurs is not our basic nature. Our basic nature is empathy and cooperation. But when we don't get it, then we get very frustrated. And so everything that we see is because of this lack of empathy and care, rather than our basic nature is savage.
So you're seeing our basic nature is this empathic cooperation with each other, just sort of biologically natural core. And it's when we don't get that empathy from others that we go into this state of savagery and violence.
Thank you, Edwin. I feel fully heard.
Okay, thanks. Speak to Leticia.
I'm listening.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking of Bill's school that he was talking about, you know, how he was trying to listen to the students in terms of creating a movement. I think what we want is all the students to be having learned how to take part in empathy circles, and every day they're taking some kind of empathy practice.
You are referring about what Bill said about his experience with the students, and the possibility we could have to have empathy lessons with the students to help them to learn about it.
Yeah, so what I guess, and I think for a movement, an empathy movement, I envision sort of a grassroots, you know, that there's a lot of people are just learning how to do empathy circles or just any kind of empathy practices. The circle is just one, but that it spreads widely. So a lot of people are just practicing it, learning the skills and having that mutual support, and that it sort of moves up through society, through the status quo, I guess, the existing society.
So you talk about the fact that the students could meet on the grass and talk empathically together to learn about an empathic society, how to build this cycle of empathy together and to spread it everywhere they
Yeah.
can.
And it's grassroots is an idiom, I guess, or a metaphor. So political grassroots is when the people get together, and so instead of it being top down, you know, from the leadership, bottom up is called grassroots. So it's the people sort of just it's just an English or I don't know, metaphor or something. Yeah.
Okay. Can you
Yeah, so
repeat,
there's a model top down. The leadership brings some ideas and push it down to the people, right? That's like one model.
Okay, you talk about a model where there is a leadership that sends his ideas to a group. And it's a metaphor, the metaphor you gave with the grass.
Well, that's top down, right?
Yeah.
And the metaphor for bottom up is starting with the grassroots, like the grass has roots. So it's all the people, and the people bring ideas and change up the hierarchy, the political, social hierarchy.
So it's an image. I see this image with, you are a leader that gives idea to the grass, and this idea he gave will create roads, kind of roads.
Yeah, well, what I guess I'm trying to say is that we can change the society by having lots of empathy circles or empathy practices, you know, spreading it through the people. And then it sort of makes that change, starting with a lot of small circles with individuals, groups.
So you said that it gives like a little seed to every brain, and this all these people will create an empathy cycle, an empathy society, and it will spread an empathic society.
Yeah, so it's the other thing I want to talk about was how to see was that, like, how do people get their needs met, I think, or be able to share their needs. And I think small groups, again, where people are able to talk to each other and be, when you're heard by someone, that you connect more with your own needs, right? If you listen to me, I'm able to connect more to my needs just by your listening. Instead of you telling me what to do, just listening to me lets me sort of connect to my needs.
Okay, you talk about the fact that when there is smaller group, it's easier to listen to each other and that people connect with each other, and in this group, it's easier to feel listened by someone. And when we feel listened, our needs are more. We can meet our needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our needs can come up. We can open up and
Yeah.
share our needs. Yeah. Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you.
Thank you. I will, Marisa, can I talk with you?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So thank you very much, Edwin, for what you said. And I totally agree with what Edwin said. When we are on a smaller group, I feel it's easier to connect with people and to meet everybody's needs, to express our needs. We can feel more secure, maybe, because we are able to express our needs and to build an empathic group.
Yeah, so you were acknowledging and thanking Edwin for what he was saying about this idea of how in a smaller group, it can be easier for us to access our own needs and talk about them because we can feel a certain sense of security to do that.
Yeah, and but sometimes we think we know how to listen, and we think we are empathically listening to someone, but in fact, sometimes we are not really listening, because when someone is telling us something important, and something difficult for him, we can say things like, oh, it makes me think about this story I had, or things like, oh, poor thing, it's okay, you will be fine, or there is a lot of ways, but in fact, this person is not always doesn't want us to give solutions, but sometimes she just wants us to listen.
Yeah. So you were saying that, sometimes we think we're good listeners and that we're listening, but our responses to what someone is saying can be dismissive, or we can change the subject to talk about a story that relates to us, and it shows that we actually weren't listening to understand. We were listening to respond, maybe with our own thought.
Yes, exactly. And it's not because we don't want to listen. It's just it's not always. In fact, I think we should learn it to school, because listening is not something we were born and, oh, we are good listeners. But in fact, it's something we practice. We learn like a language, And if we always think we are listening, but we are telling another story or comments, we don't know we are not listening, and this person can't really always express her needs, and it's more difficult for her to connect or to find solutions, or no, not find solutions, but to connect with herself.
Yeah. So you're saying that, listening, I think active listening isn't really a skill that we're born with. It's something we need to learn and to practice. And that, it's not that we don't even know that maybe we don't have that skill, but that it's so necessary for us to continue to practice, because if we're responding in a way that isn't showing that we understand the person's needs, that are the person that is talking, it doesn't create the connection for that person to feel safe to explore those needs.
Yes, exactly. And I think everybody can know how to listen if he understands what does really mean to listen. And if we all learn it at school, we could maybe build a society where it's a better society, more empathic, and we could have maybe less violence because the society is more empathic. People feel more listened, and you are not the guilty one that made something bad, but you are just one maybe that can't really express his needs and doesn't know how to express. So with violence, sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, and it sounds like you're sort of echoing and supporting. Well, you're also saying that this could be a really important skill to be learned and practiced at school, because again, it is a skill, and it's something that is so crucial to us being able to be in touch with our own needs, so that we don't need to use violence to communicate what they are.
Yeah, thank you very much. I felt really, you're a good listener. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for those thoughts.
So we just have 11 minutes left. So maybe we can just go around, maybe just how was just take a minute or so. How was the session today, or the circle today? Just sort of a little bit of a debrief. Do you want to start, Marissa?
Sure. I thought it was really good, and I really enjoy the way that the conversation weaved in and out of topics, but really seemed to stay centered on why empathy and the practice of active listening and active speaking, right? Both sides of it is so important. And I also enjoy this thread about how that's something that's so necessary, both on a community grassroots scale, but also with our youth, the children, and maybe how some really interesting ideas about how that could be done. So thank you all so much for the input. It was really great.
Great. Anne, do you want to go? You're muted.
Yep, it was an interesting conversation. I'm still thinking about it, and bits that, yeah, there's lots more to say. It would have been good if we could have gone further. It would be interesting to see where we got to.
Yeah, I've been thinking maybe we could do a day-long empathy cafe, like just a marathon. What would that be like? An empathy marathon, 6 hours, 8 hours, just to see kind of what that is like. So I'm thinking of setting that up on some Saturday. So, Bill?
I'm really enjoyed everything, the conversation. I really liked everybody bringing in their ideas, and this is a small group, but it's the beginning, I think, of a very profound and meaningful movement. And so I appreciate I would just want to recognize people's individual bravery to actually be part of that. And I feel very appreciative. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Larry?
Okay, so I really enjoyed today. Great conversation. I'm hearing that empathy is the missing link to human civilization actually living in peace, the way we're naturally designed to live. And I think there ought to be a congressional investigation. So I think Edwin should run for Congress and find out, bring some empathy into the government. Find out where is this? Why haven't you guys been, bringing empathy into everywhere, grassroots and on? So yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, I'll be sure to do that. They'll put that on the platform. If I got into Congress, the idea is to have Republicans and Democrats have empathy circles with each other is the one of the projects. So Leticia, do you want to share?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody in this group because I feel really in peace. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was amazing, and to share all this empathy together and listen, and every subject was really interesting. And thank you very much. And I have a question. If I want to listen again the recording, is it possible?
Yeah, I can post it. If you put your email address in the chat,
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
email everyone who
Thank you very much.
And then I do post it. It might take a few days before it's posted. Maybe not. I can do it right away. There won't be a lot of this information about it. I mean, I'll just post it, and that's pretty easy. It takes like an hour or two for it to render before. So if you're wanting to, I don't know, Marissa, if you're wanting to get the link, if you want to, and Leticia, if you put, they got it, your email.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll send you a link. There are, yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think of where, yeah, I'll just send an email around that. Oh, there we go. Copy that.
Thank you for your patience all with my English. Sometimes but a little.
Well, we're very grateful that you come, and that I know it's an extra, stress with the language, and it's just that you're willing to come. We're very grateful that you're here and willing to be part of this. So let's see, for the debrief, I think one thing we've been at our last call, we were looking at kind of the topic, for these discussions, and it seemed to be moving towards the question of how do we build an empathy movement? Because if we have that as a question, a gateway question, kind of everything that kind of comes up sort of ties in with building an empathy movement. And I get pretty excited about, how do we really build this movement? How do we bring empathy into the schools? How do we bring it into community groups and in all the different situations? So I'm just curious, what do you think about that as a topic about building an empathy movement? I see, Marissa, you're shaking your head. So it sounds like you had some ideas about that, if you'd like to comment.
I do. I really like that for a few different reasons. Specific to my organization, I'll just share that I'm the leadership training coordinator for one of my community organizations. It's a diversity, equity, inclusion group. And I have advocated that, I'll go through this training, but then maybe we all participate in a cohort at some point as a way to start to utilize this. So to that point, on a broader, just for a broader discussion, I think it would be really cool to see how lots of different orgs are facilitating conversations or, have ideas about how to bring more conversation in. Because I do see it in two of the orgs that I work with as one of the main barriers to understanding is just having the skill set of how to hold an equitable conversation. So I really just want to say that I think that having groups come together to discuss how we're doing this would be really interesting.
We are part of the Listen First Coalition. I don't know if you've heard of them. Let's see, let me just bring this up real quick here if I can find the link. The Listen First Coalition is a coalition of groups that are interested in how to bridge the political polarization in the United States. And we have a cafe coming up. And I'll put that link in there. There's a cafe. You're welcome to attend that too. So it'll be an empathy cafe. If you look up Listen First Coalition or Listen First, you'll come up with their website. So it's like an association of all these different groups that are coming together. So I think that's great to sort of collaborate like that. And they're having a week of National Week of Dialogue, April 23rd, I think it starts. And this is going to be sort of a debrief meeting afterwards with that coalition. So anyway, so it sounds like you like the idea of a movement, the topic of how do we build this movement, and you're seeing that, using the practice could help with different organizations in connecting and taking the training, take maybe the cohort together. We're also glad if the group wants to start a cohort, that we, if you have a date and time, we can have trainers that actually come to it too, if there's enough people. So that's an option too.
That'd be great. Yeah. Who would I get in touch with about that? Would that be you, Edwin, or
myself
Bill?
or Bill or Larry, kind of any of us. My email's kind of all over the place, so it's easy to get in contact with me.
Okay.
It's
Great.
on the Best Training website too. It says, yeah.
Okay.
Leticia, you're muted.
Sorry. When you talk about cafe, is it something online or in San Francisco in a cafe?
Oh, yeah, we just call the Empathy Circle is like, 4, 5, 6 people in a group like we are here doing the empathic listening. What we call an empathy cafe is you can have 40 or 100 people come, and they come all together. We call that an empathy cafe. And then we give the instructions of how to do the circle, and then we divide into empathy circles. So the empathy cafe is just a term we have for a large group coming together.
Okay.
So it's just more of a metaphor. It's not a, literal cafe.
Okay.
You could bring coffee and stuff, certainly.
Okay. And it's online every Monday, right?
We haven't starting, I think, there'll be a cafe, an empathy cafe, an intro cafe starting in April, I think, on Mondays, right, Bill? That was the idea.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's what happened is usually we're meeting every, we had all this set up because I'm running for Congress. I haven't had so much time to do the production. So a group is kind of stepping in now to do the production. They're kind of in a bit of a transition time here. So what did you think of the topic of the movement building? If we have that as more of the framing of this time, would be how do we create a movement? I'm just curious what you think, Leticia, about that.
To ask the question at the beginning, how we can create this movement?
Right. It's instead of we ask like what the issues are important to you, right? But we would ask what is the how might we build a movement, if that was the gateway question. Just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I think it was a good way to begin, because it's a question that is very open, so everybody can express what he thinks about when we talk about empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we could talk about the way we think we can build a community of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
The idea people can have to build a kind of community, family. What does it mean?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody could maybe I think maybe it could be good to send before the question so people can think about it, and when we begin, we could have time to think about it, and then we have ideas to, well, we had ideas, but we can have we can think about it. And
yeah, you come prepared a little. If the question is there in advance, you kind of already have a lot of ideas that you can bring to it.
Yeah, and then you
Be
can
prepared.
select the ideas you really want to express, and maybe when people share ideas, it can bring new ideas, and we can all develop ideas and build this community. And maybe we could at the end exchange the contact, and people could create a group, and we can all talk about it. So like a kind of I don't know the word, like a group, you know.
Yeah, create a community of practice where people are kind of building a community out of it, an ongoing community. Yeah. Maybe. Okay, cool. Anne, any thoughts? Oh, sorry. Is there more?
No, and we can we can send questions to, when we think again about what someone said, we can send in a question about what he said, and if he's okay, he can answer, and it can build connection between people that have the same kind of ideas, the same
and similar interests. Yeah, similar
yeah,
interests,
exactly.
similar
It's a
values,
word
similar intention. You can just keep building on that. And
and when people feel connected, they feel it creates a sensation of security, of well-being.
Yeah, nice. Okay, Anne, any thoughts on that? What I'm saying is maybe changing the topic, from the get-go, creating an event that says, come, how do we build an empathy movement? I'm just trying to get a little bit of ideas around that, how it sounds, for bringing people in.
Well, to be honest, I've been thinking that what you had today, which was about what issues are important to you, because everybody has something that's important to them. And when they bring it, which we did today, and then what happened, it was interesting how we interconnected and how our conversation evolved, and empathy kept taking a big part of that, playing a big part in our conversation. But so I think there's a value in having that, rather than attracting people who already would understand the value of empathy. So you're bringing in more, and for example, I think what Marisa brought, and maybe the connection with the Listen First project, and the possibility of an empathy team being able to go to support a movement to develop, or an organization to develop those skills.
Okay, yeah, it's like the topic, what's important to you, everybody can just bring what's important to them, and then the next is so juggling between those two, between how do we build a movement and coming with is something I was trying to think about too. So I appreciate you sort of airing that. Okay, Bill, any quick thoughts on that?
No quick thoughts. No.
Long thoughts.
Long and involved. No, I agree. And I think that, they say that when the people lead, the leaders will follow. And I think that that's the way to do this.
Okay, great. Larry, last word before we end.
I think the Empathy Circle is the best way to do this. What you're doing is great. I think it's great.
Okay, well, great. Then we'll see you next week. We'll be here to be continued, and and I'll send the video link in a couple hours to both of you too. Right. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, bye, everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great being with you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.